Hey everybody, looks like I'm live. I'm always very disorganised in this first few seconds. So, welcome. Thanks everybody for coming and watching another one of my exciting readings. I'm again going to be reading from Kamikaze Kangaroos, which interestingly enough this book now has totally different cover, because this was one of those ones that I was talking about before with that bear, the little cuddly toy covers. And this, interestingly enough, this tiny little van is actually a Matchbox van of the same variety as Rusty, the van that we were driving around, which Rue painted with nail polish.
Oh yeah.
So that's why that's why we have this rather interesting looking little specimen on the cover at the bottom there. So that I finally have developed enough Photoshop skills to do slightly better covers using the photos that we actually had from when we were travelling around. So we've got one of me on a rock formation called the Devil's Marbles, which is pretty cool. I was doing a bit of climbing. So yeah, I've got covers for all of them done now.
Yeah, including the box set.
So, Rui's telling me that some people are logging in.
Yeah, baby.
She's sitting over here, bless her. She's got a big egg on her head because
Oh, don't tell people what happened.
we were shopping for zips, and we were in a fabric shop for quite a while. And she was very excited with all her purchases of many zips and fabrics and things. And then we were walking out, and the shop has huge glass doors of the kind that sometimes slide open and closed. In this instance, don't. They're just the regular push ones, but they're very clean. And so she looked at them, assumed they were open. Possibly they would slide open, I don't know. And then looked down, she was just trying to get the keys out of her handbag when when she noticed that there was a small metal strip at the bottom of the door. And as you would, she thought she'd have to step over that to get out. So what she actually did was she performed a kung fu maneuver on the door. She actually kneed it with full velocity at the same time as headbutting it, which is fantastic. And she nearly knocked herself out. And it made her made her sound like it'd been hit by a train. And a woman from behind the desk went, "Shit!" comes sprinting. "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay?" And she was fine. We found it incredibly funny when she'd actually recovered. Poor girl.
Mate, yeah.
She's what unfortunately the conclusion we've come to is that after all this time living with me, she's finally caught Slater. So she's got lots more of that to look forward to. As that, to say that runs in my family is an understatement.
Definitely.
Anyway, there's quite a few people that have tuned in already, so I'm going to start the reading. I promise not to keep you quite as long this time. I rambled on for an hour last time, which is ridiculous. And some people have got to get to bed, namely us, because, you know,
Yeah, we've got to feed the cat.
we've got to feed the cat in the morning. So, shall I start?
You may.
What do you think?
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. So what I'll do is I'm gonna read from where I left off last time, because there's some good bits coming up, or some bits I find amusing anyway. And then after this reading, because I'll do a few more from this book, I'll skip ahead a bit. And I'll do next week I'll cherry pick some of the random bits and bats from throughout it that are like iconic or whatever. And then the week after that, I'll probably do some of the stories with me and Rue centered around our relationship. So, you know, Rue might be sitting in the corner dying of embarrassment during that one.
Just a little bit.
And then I'll progress and do some of the New Zealand ones at the end, because had some good time in New Zealand, eh?
Yes.
Anyway, right, time to start. So here we go. So when I left you off, in case you're wondering, for anybody who wasn't watching along last time or hasn't seen the video, we were set off north, me, my sister Jill and Rue. We were driving in Rusty, and we got not very far, because Australia's pretty large. So, oh yes, this is pre first breakdown. We just hit a national park with lots of little rocks, which wasn't terribly exciting. And there we were. All creatures great and small. The next morning, after a leisurely breakfast of leftovers, we carefully packed all our gear and ourselves back into Rusty. Our first stop off, just down the road, was Lake Thetis, an inland seawater lake that was home to the stromatolites. No, Not a cheesy rock tribute band, they are unique microscopic creatures known from the fossil record as the earliest form of life on Earth. It's Jill's fault for raising my expectations by telling me we were going to see the oldest living organisms in the world. When I hear something like that, my mind instantly goes to T-Rex. Sadly, the stromatolites were small lumps of rock at the edge of a lake. You can see the bubbles where the bacteria is doing whatever it does. Even Jill sounded disappointed. How excited can you get over bacteria? Maybe we should come back in a few million years, she added. By then they might have evolved into even bigger creatures that blow even more bubbles. The possibilities are endless, I agreed. So we decided not to sully their 3.5 billion year legacy with our continued presence. And no, I told Jill, before you suggest it, we do not need a pet stromatolite. Aww, but they hardly eat anything. Since leaving Perth, the temperature had been rising dramatically. Now, only 300 kilometres further north, it was already becoming uncomfortable. Sitting still for 10 minutes had turned the inside of Rusty into a sauna. We opened all the doors to vent the baking hot air, replacing it with marginally less hot air from the surrounding desert. And then we drove, and drove, and drove. If we'd been back home in the UK, we would have fallen off the edge. Not so in Australia. One of the few things I had known before coming here is that it's a fairly big place. Size, I feel, is a relative concept, and my idea of big was limited to things I already knew that fell into that bracket, like my credit card bill. Well, I was about to gain a new understanding of big. Starting with kangaroos, which are commonly represented in the Western world by cartoon characters and cute fluffy toys, giving the impression that they're small, friendly, somewhat comedic creatures. They are not. The few we saw in the distance, as late afternoon tinged towards evening, were the size of Jill, which I'll grant you isn't huge. But I'd been expecting something the size of a dog stood on its hind legs, so to see animals weighing in at close to what a person does was a bit of an eye-opener. As was the fact that Rue kept referring to her namesakes as cute little greys. They come bigger than that, I asked her when she pointed out another little group. Oh yes, wait till we get a bit further north. The reds are everywhere and out in the bush. How big? Like my height? Yeah, she said, I'd say the girls would be about your height. On up the western edge of Australia we journeyed, the road now hugging the Indian Ocean to spectacular effect. After the previous day's drive through over 200 miles of flat red dirt, the change of scenery was a welcome relief. The beauty of that coast is in its raw elements, the rust-coloured rock giving way to the narrow fringe of golden sand, and then to the sea, the water mirroring the sky, both of them as blue as any postcard of paradise. The wind blasts and buffets, carrying a hint of Antarctic chill as it surges inland. There's nothing to stop it, no obstacles, either man-made or natural. And above it all, the sun rains down its fire, more potent here than almost anywhere else on Earth. The hole we tore in the ozone layer back in the 1980s might have dropped out of the spotlight of the world's media, but it's still around, and Australia is where it likes to hang out. So while the rest of the planet views Aussies as a nation of sun worshippers, the vast majority of them avoid going out in the sun as much as possible. Skin cancer is rife, owing to dangerously high UV levels, and TV ads regularly drive home the message, slip, slop, slap. As in, slip on a shirt, slop on the sunscreen, and slap on a hat. Because you don't want to end up wearing your bum on your face. A reference to skin cancer surgery where they replace the cutaway bits, commonly on the nose and cheeks, with a graft from your nice, soft buttocks. It's an environment that bites back all right, and that's even before we consider the wildlife. But it's beautiful. It was dark by the time we reached Geraldton, but we were delighted to discover that this particular dot on the map belonged to a real town and the first supermarket since Perth. To celebrate, we bought an entire tub of ice cream, a bottle of caramel sauce and some Tim Tams, delicious chocolate-coated biscuits that were set to become my newest addiction. The girls had a tradition established on their trips around America and Europe called Ice Cream Wednesday. They used it both as a reward and as a way to mark the passing of the weeks. Weekends can cease to have meaning when you aren't working, and endless days of long-term travel have a way of blending into one another. I've lost count of the number of times someone's asked me what day it is, only to watch me glance around for any clues and come up with nothing. So Wednesday became the new Sunday, with the consumption of ice cream as our chosen mechanism for marking it. Tell you what, it beats the snot out of going to church. Perhaps in response to this blasphemy, the heavens opened, and as we sat in Rusty eating huge bowls of ice cream, we decided not to bother pitching the tent. We found a campsite, drove right up to the kitchen, deboxed just enough stuff to cook a nice chicken korma. By which I mean 3 bowls, 3 spoons and an industrial-sized tin of microwavable chicken korma. Then we settled down to spend our first night in the van. I don't know if you've ever slept in the back of a car or not. I have, for several reasons, ranging from poorly anticipated poverty to extreme stupidity to accidents involving me having a mouth the size of Rift Valley. What I will say about it is this: cars are not designed for sleeping in. Well, except the ones that are designed for sleeping in, and even those ones are bloody uncomfortable. Sleeping in Rusty was like some kind of Chinese torture. At first, it seemed quite inviting, with all the seats flattened out and Jill's psychedelic dolphin curtains at every window, with the low-drained strip light, helpfully fitted by Rouge Dad, glowing, and our sleeping bags disguising the contours of the back seat cum bed, Rusty looked quite cosy. But Rusty, we were already starting to realise, had a spiteful streak. For starters, he was too narrow. The middle row of seats, where 3 pairs of legs wriggled and writhed, were full width. Not so the back row of seats, which coincided with our shoulders. At the broadest part of us, Rusty was only 2 seats wide, and those seats were tilted steeply upwards because all our worldly possessions were crammed underneath them. Seatbelt holders, reclining levers, armrests, all these things, so convenient whilst driving, dug into the soft, fleshy parts of us. The seats undulated in exactly the opposite way to my spine, so that no matter which side I lay on, it felt like I was being folded in half. It was hot, and it was cramped, and we couldn't open the windows for fear of a full-scale mosquito invasion. Sweat ran down my legs, condensation dripped on me from the seal above the side window, and every time I tried to squirm into a more comfortable position, something hard and unyielding jabbed me somewhere delicate and tender. If there's a less pleasant place in the world to sleep, I have yet to discover it. All 3 of us lay awake for hours. At about 4 a.m, the rain stopped, and I realised I'd been listening intently to something else that was going on outside. It had grown from background noise to a deafening shriek, magnified by my mind perhaps, but drowning out any further chance of rest. "What the hell is that noise?" I moaned. "I can hear the cicadas, but that other sound? It's high-pitched like a police whistle." "Oh, that's the frogs," Rue said. "But why are they whistling?" "Because they're frogs," she explained. "That's the sound they make." "Eh? No, that can't be right. We've got plenty of frogs in England. Frogs croak." "Frogs don't croak. How stupid is that? Birds croak." No, it's frogs. Everyone knows that. Like in that cartoon with the frog and the chicken in a library, and the chicken goes, "Book, book, book," and the frog goes, "Read it, read it, read it." You know? Apparently she didn't know, which resulted in me spending the next 10 minutes gurgling in my throat trying to create an adequate frog noise. You should try it next time it's 4 a.m. and you can't sleep because you're lying in a padded oven with 2 other people. It gives everyone a good laugh, especially when you choke on your own spit and segue into a coughing fit. Then passed another of those mutually agreed sleep attempts, where everyone tries really hard to get to sleep, only to have the bugger next to them turn over and knee them in the back just as they were drifting off. It was no use. With the door open briefly to exchange the air, another peculiar noise was coming to my attention. "Rue, what the hell is that then?" "Is what?" she yawned. "That pinging noise. It's all around us. It goes like boing, bong, bong. Sounds like a midnight ukulele convention. Are the rednecks in the bush? We're not going to get raped, are we?" "I keep telling you, that's the frogs." "You said the whistling was the frogs." She sighed and started speaking more slowly. I think my intelligence had just dropped a notch in her estimation. "The whistling frogs are whistling. That's why they're called whistling frogs." "Right. And the ones that sound like a banjo string being plucked? Those ones are the banjo frogs." "You are absolutely shitting me right now." "No, not at all. I can't believe you haven't heard them before. Do you know about motorbike frogs then?" "Motorbike frogs? No, what do they sound like?" "Well, like a..." She paused. "You're taking the piss out of me, aren't you?" "A little." "Then you can bugger off with your stupid croaking frogs. Go on, do an impression, please." "No, you'll hear them soon enough." Around us, the banjo chorus continued. Rue rolled onto her side, squirming in a futile bid to find a comfortable position. So frogs don't whistle at all in England, she muttered to herself. How weird is that? Happy returns. The next morning, there was cause for celebration, for me at least. It was my birthday. Somehow, more by luck than by design, I had achieved the ripe old age of 28. That's a good age, a responsible age. People I knew back home had started families already, had good jobs with potential for career progression and mortgages to match. Whereas I had, what exactly? Freedom. Happiness, certainly. Hell, I had a rucksack full of that. And not a whole lot else. And as for responsibility, making sure that ice packs were frozen before we left the campsite was mine. And that was about it. But, ice packs can be important. Buried in Rusty's boot, we had what Australians call an esky. It's a brand name which is used to refer to any type of portable cold storage unit. In Oz, they've perfected this technology, either because their environment is so unforgiving that access to cold water can mean the difference between life and death, or because they place a similar importance on keeping their beers cold. I'll leave you to decide which is more likely. So, any decent camping store stocks a whole range of options, from lowly insulated picnic bags to diesel-powered, climate-controlled mobile fridge freezers. The esky Ru's dad had lent us fell somewhere between these extremes and was a kind of hamper-sized plastic cool box that most Brits would be familiar with. They don't work too badly either, in England. Out here, after spending the morning baking in Rusty, it was no match for the searing daytime heat. The ice cream is a bit, Ru said, stirring it with her finger. It'll still taste the same, said Jill. Maybe it will, only it's warm. We'd spent the morning raiding the $2 shops, which were oddly abundant in Geraldton. Now we were sitting down for a celebratory birthday lunch in the park, under the shade of a single stunted tree. On the menu we had leftover curry, on sandwiches, washed down with a bowl each of warm liquid ice cream, with caramel sauce of course, and then the pièce de la résistance, a donut. This one was all for me. At some point, one of the girls must have scurried off to a different $2 store and bought a packet of birthday candles. We couldn't get enough candles on top because of the extremely limited surface area of donuts, and because in my extreme age I'd crossed a certain threshold and was now nearly 2 packets old. And when 3 people try simultaneously to light birthday candles on the ground in strong wind, all you tend to achieve is the loss of a few eyebrows. We stood considerably more chance of lighting the donut, to be honest, so eventually I waved the girls off and claimed my prize. It was gooey and jam-filled and partially blackened from some over-enthusiastic lighter action. Singed donut. Just how I like 'em. Then Jill held out her hand to me and opened it. Happy birthday, Tony! Jill, I don't know what to say. It's a plastic fish. It is! And you can't actually have him because he's mine. But I wanted to have something to give to you. So say hello to our newest travelling companion. Is he an air freshener from the $2 shop? He is! And he's spradoingy! For proof, Jill flicked the fish, making him bobble round on its spring. I thought about the kind of presents other people my age would be receiving. A couple of Xbox games, perhaps. Or an actual Xbox. A new helmet to wear when riding their motorbike. A new set of speakers for the home cinema. But they do say you should be grateful for the little things in life. I bet whoever coined that phrase had never been given a spradoingy plastic fish for their birthday. It redefines the boundaries of little things. But I loved him all the same, even if he wasn't mine. The girls also bought me a t-shirt, possibly because I've been wearing the same 2 t-shirts since we started the trip and alternating them, rather than washing them, on the grounds that they were okay again after a certain length of time away from my body. Both girls strongly disagreed with this philosophy. In fairness, Rusty was a mobile oven, and within minutes of climbing inside him we were all dripping with sweat. Even on the coolest days, the sheer amount of glass turned the inside of the car into a hot box, and apparently opening the windows only helped circulate any smells developing in the back. Sigh. There were advantages to travelling with 2 attractive women. The street cred mostly. Being constantly reminded to wash more often wasn't one of them. I promised them that I would shower and put on a clean t-shirt as soon as we got to the next campsite. My last birthday present came from Frida, Ru's mum. She'd sent it along with us for me to open on the right day. It was a black baseball cap with Australia proudly emblazoned across it. I loved it and wore it almost constantly. In fact, I only took the thing off for sleeping, and whenever I was wearing my new t-shirt, which coincidentally also had Australia written across it. Don't want to look too much like a tourist, I thought, as I climbed back into our multicoloured, handprint-covered van. That evening, a few hundred miles further north, we sat around a campfire, eating fish and chips, drinking goon and discussing our plans. We'd been lucky enough to arrive just as the supermarket was closing, and we'd bought all the sandwiches they were about to throw away for next to nothing. That sealed it. Our intention for tomorrow was to drive into the nearby national park, take our packed lunches and do a spot of hiking. I sat up late that night, watching the stars twinkle brightly in the absence of other light. I was in a philosophical mood, either due to the significance of the day, or more likely due to the significant amount of cheap wine I'd consumed. A year ago, I'd been in England, desperate to be anywhere else. Now here I was on the other side of the world. Just achieving that much felt like a victory. The fact that I was fulfilling a long-held dream of travelling Australia, and doing it in such style, that was an unexpected bonus. The icing on the cake, you might say. Or the donut. I decided that no matter what happened from here on in, on future birthdays I would remember this moment. How happy I could be living so simply, and how grateful I felt to be so completely and utterly responsibility free. I owned almost nothing. I owed nothing to anyone, well, unless you counted the credit card company, and I wanted nothing more than what I already had. Although a hot naked woman waiting for me in my sleeping bag wouldn't have gone amiss. Perhaps I'll ask for one of those next year. It didn't seem terribly likely, given my current living situation, but then that was the exciting part. Literally anything could happen in the next 365 days. I was looking forward to every single one of them. I'll remind myself, wherever I am next year, that life is for living, I thought. If I'm not in the middle of some crazy adventure, that will be my wake-up call, to get out there and have some fun, just live a little, before I get to the point where I lose the option. For now, though, the closest I would get to adventure was a stumble through the darkness to the toilet block, followed by bed. Tomorrow was a new day, and it glistened with promise. It was going to be one hell of an interesting year. How long have we been going on, my love? Shall I...
2 minutes.
22? Shall I do one more?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well,
Which one? Should I be worried?
park life. Require me to do some acting this one.
Oh, hell.
I haven't mentioned it anywhere yet, but the roads have dwindled since Perth. Not only in number, but in size. In the UK, our major cities are connected by huge 6-lane motorways. It's only when we reach those cities that we sit in gridlock amidst networks of tiny medieval streets governed by countless traffic lights and archaic one-way systems, and punctuated by those hell-spawned mini roundabouts. In Perth, the biggest, widest roads ran straight through the city. Freeways led to every different area, and even the streets of the central business district were several lanes deep. Conversely, once we got out in the open, the solitary road between Perth and the cities further north was a narrow ribbon of tarmac, a single carriageway in each direction, with no crash barriers, no hard shoulder, not even fences to keep the livestock off it. The crumbling edges of the road blended seamlessly into the rocky red dirt, and the vast majority of the junctions, the few that we saw, were wide swathes of dust and gravel where unsealed tracks branched off into the wilderness. It was down one of these dubious tracks that we turned rusty, heading into the Kalbarri National Park on a route which can only be described as off-road. We regretted it almost instantly. The action of the wind and an endless succession of four-wheel drives ploughing up and down had sculpted the surface of the road into millions of ridges, like miniature speed bumps less than 2 inches apart. It was like driving on a corrugated tin roof for 15 miles. Noisy doesn't even come close. Rusty started shaking the second we left the tarmac. Really shaking, I mean, like a knackered washing machine on the spin cycle. It made my teeth chatter so hard I was worried about chipping them. It made Rusty's bodywork and innards vibrate so hard they became a blur. And every knife, fork, spoon, pot, pan, plate, tent pole, tent peg, food can, drink can and gas can chattered and clattered like an earthquake in a tambourine factory. A succession of big four-wheel drives cruised past, each effortlessly chewing up the road and engulfing us in their dust trail. "Try speeding up," I suggested. "Maybe it's easier at speed." Rue pushed a quivering foot onto the accelerator, and Rusty leapt forward as though he'd been stung. The rattling grew to a deafening roar. I was sure there were pieces falling off the car. Rusty drifted as he shook, the loose dirt under his tyres behaving more like ice than gravel. "Ah!" I cried. "Ah!" cried Jill. "Ah!" cried Rue, which was more worrying as she was driving. "Shit! Slow down!" Dust billowed around us, blocking the road from view as we slipped and skidded along it. When Rue brought Rusty back under control, we agreed that the speed theory had been adequately tested. We renamed it the certain death theory and decided to take full advantage of having lived through it by never, ever repeating it. 8 miles an hour was the most we could manage. Even at that speed, Rusty was shaking himself apart. It felt like we'd replaced his wheels with square ones. "We should turn back," I stammered, managing to bite the tip of my tongue twice in one sentence. "We can't," replied Rue. "Nearly there." She was lying. It took us 2 hours to reach the car park. By the time we got off to the end of the corrugated road, we discovered our first casualty. The Spredoingy fish had been shaken up so much that scented gel was leaking out of his gills, making a sticky pile of smelly pink fish innards on the dashboard. Jill declared the little fella dead on arrival, and I soothed her grief by pointing out that he was the lucky one. He'd escaped. We had to make the same trip back again. If you've ever tried to walk after being on a boat for a long time, you might have experienced land sickness, the feeling that you're still moving and that the ground under you is heaving and swelling. We suffered from vibration sickness, the feeling that someone nearby was using a jackhammer with such ferocity that the vibrations were travelling right through the ground and up our legs. We staggered around the car park like a bunch of drunks, while our central nervous systems tried to adjust to the sudden stillness. It was probably hilarious to watch, like an old episode of Star Trek where the cast are really trying to sell the effects of the Enterprise taking a direct hit. Finally, I felt I'd recovered enough to use the toilet without pissing all over the place. It was a long drop, the kind of outback dunny that consists of a garden shed containing a box with a toilet seat over a very deep, very smelly hole. Not the ideal facility to use when one's ability to stand upright has been compromised. I bounced off several walls and emerged feeling worse than I'd gone in. "Why did we come here again?" I asked. "Ah, yes. Hiking." The main selling point of the Kalbarri National Park was Nature's Window, a natural archway formed right on the edge of a precipice. It framed a panoramic view of the vast, empty landscape and the narrow gorge that cut through it. The view is even better from the top of the arch, which was easily reached by climbing on an ironically placed sign warning, "Climbing danger!" Far below us, the river winding through the gorge was emerald green, reflecting the scrubby vegetation that clung to every nook and hollow. The cliffs were a dark, rusty red, and in the bends of the river, yellow sand had accumulated, forming a series of miniature beaches. It was a stunning essay in the colours of nature. Here, even the barren rock put on a pretty show, as though to make up for the complete lack of anything else to look at. "It's gorgeous," I commented, and not for the first time. The next warning sign we encountered was where the trail petered out, about 10 paces from the car park. Evidently, this chunk of unspoilt wilderness was particularly unspoilt. "Gorge risk area," the sign read. "Turn back unless you are cautious, fit and agile, prepared to scramble, comfortable with heights and carrying water." "Well, you're screwed straight away," Jill said to me. "Why? I'm great with heights. I'm fit and I love to scramble." "Yeah, but you're the least cautious person I've ever known." "Oh, screw caution, who needs that?" Exactly. We descended into the gorge, picking our way down tracks that probably weren't tracks at all. The strata in the rock ran horizontally, giving it a stripy appearance. The eroded layers formed flat plains and step-like edges, inspiring those of us who love to climb, that's me, to venture higher and higher, and higher than was probably wise. It was so easy, so much fun, that before long both the girls were scaling the cliffs in all directions. Nature had provided us with a wonderful playground, and after making a supreme effort to get here, we figured we might as well make the most of it. The river was so still in places, so unaffected by the wind racing across the flat desert above, that it became a mirror. The doubled view of rock and sky reflected in the tranquil water was made even more impressive by the complete lack of anything man-made to spoil it. There was nobody there but us, and looking around the place, I could easily imagine that there never had been. No litter, no graffiti, no sign of human passage at all. It's possible we were a bit lost. But never mind. With a bit of narrow ledge work, we followed the river on its serpentine path, sometimes walking three abreast, sometimes single file, crabbing sideways on our tiptoes, hugging the rock. In one of the narrower sections, With the walls closed in above us, Jill paused. "Whoa, listen," she said. We stopped dead and listened. "Listen, listen, listen," echoed faintly back down towards us. "Ha ha!" I called. "Echo!" Listening to the reverberations as echo, echo was repeated up and down the length of the canyon. Just then, a deafening shriek rent the air. "Ow!" The sound billowed out around us, crashing into the walls of the gorge and bouncing back to wash over us again. It sounded like those monsters from Pitch Black were coming from every direction to tear us to shreds. Rocks fell in the distance. I think I pooed a little. When the sound abated and the echoes subsided, Jill and I dropped our hands from our ears and turned to look at Rue, from whose throat the unearthly noise had come. "What?" she asked. "You don't do that in England?" No. We mostly just say echo." "Where's the fun in that?" As the afternoon wore on, we started looking for a route back. Every curve we rounded offered another rugged vista. It was absolutely gorgeous. "If you don't stop saying that, you'll be swimming in it," Jill informed me. We came across a wooden signpost with what looked like a line drawing of a colon on it. We assumed this was a route marker, but there were no notes to accompany the bowel diagram. No "you are here" with a line pointing to the sphincter. No clue as to which direction the stomach was in. I assumed the car park was at the stomach end, otherwise we were incredibly lost and would be exiting via the rectum, neither of which appealed to me. We were unsurprisingly rather late getting back to the car park. Rusty was the only vehicle left, and we still had the agonising 2-hour trip out of the park to look forward to. Only this time we'd have to go slower, because it was getting dark and there would be kangaroos on the road. "But it's so barren," I said. "It's hard to imagine anything surviving here." "Oh, there were loads of signs of life back there," Rue informed me. "There was wallaby poo all over the place." "Really?" "And it was definitely wallaby poo." "Yep," Rue said, thereby admitting that she could tell the difference. I decided to take her word for it, because when you're travelling with someone for the first time, it's always good to find they know their shit. And one more? One more. You can just, quit any time. Getting high. I have been told, on occasion, that there's something wrong in my brain.
Many a time.
Hey! Today, apparently. Not by doctors, you understand, just by, well, pretty much everyone else. So, as I stood at the base of a 100-foot cliff, looking up, some miswired chip in my head fired up, where most sane people would have said, "Fuck me, that's a big bugger," and carried on walking. I turned to the others and said, "We've got to do this one." It had been another long day of hiking and climbing. Same gorge, different day. Okay, technically speaking, it was a different gorge as well, but it looked identical to the last one. We were several days and over 600 kilometres north of Kalbarri in yet another national park with the equally ambiguous name of Cape Range. The girls looked at each other, then back at me. I could tell they were hesitant, but this didn't sound any kind of alarm in my head. Well, okay, it did, but the alarm was saying, "Quick, get started before they have a chance to think up excuses." We'd done some great climbs already, and both girls had grown in confidence since this morning. I knew they had it in them to manage this one, as long as I could get them started before nervousness set in. This one would be our crowning glory, our ultimate challenge. Plus, I really wanted to climb it. I've always loved climbing stuff. Some would say I've always loved to climb stuff that I really shouldn't climb. Not too long ago, this habit had come to a head in a tricky situation in Thailand which had very nearly cost me my life. Afterwards, I'd promised myself that in the future I would think before I climbed, that I would analyse the situation and weigh up the dangers, even do something previously unheard of and actually consider not climbing something. I think it's a testament to my strength of character that today was the first time in almost 6 months that I broke that promise. Up I went, an easy scramble for the first few body lengths. I looked back over my shoulder at the sky, realising that Rue and Jill were already quite a way below me. But in fairness to the pair of them, they were both trying it. "You're doing great," I called down to them. "See, this bit's not too bad." Rue was having an easier time of it than Jill, purely because she was built for it. Climbing is all about strength to weight ratio, and Jill, for her size, is fiendishly strong. But Rue was strong too, and she had less body weight than some stick insects. Her long, lean limbs splayed out in all directions to find holds even I hadn't been able to reach. She wasn't relying on strength, at least not yet. Honestly, if we'd filled her lungs with helium, I think she'd have floated to the top. First Rue, then Jill reached me. I decided to wait for them because the next section looked quite steep. Well, steep for a cliff. I think the appropriate term is sheer. But I was confident, and I sought to give them confidence by pointing out the hand and footholds as we went. It was an arduous climb, but not impossible. Slowly but surely we inched our collective way upwards. Jill called up to suggest a brief rest, and I agreed wholeheartedly. The next ledge above me was an obvious choice, so I hauled myself over its lip and thrust my hand down to help Rue. Jill powered over the edge herself, huffing and puffing a bit, but exhilarated with the accomplishment. She stood and looked out at the view, empty air stretching all the way across to the opposite side of the canyon. Beautiful, she said. Motherfucker, I replied, which startled both of them. They looked confused until they saw me slapping at my legs. Giant red ants had climbed me in a fraction of the time it had taken me to climb their cliff, and unlike our little group, they weren't stopping for a rest. Shit, said Rue, those things bite really bad. Then both girls started swearing as they swatted at dozens of insects that had already ventured onto their shoes and up their trouser legs. Cries of "Ah! Ow!" mingled with the profanity as the creatures began to take their revenge. We can't stay here, I said. Climb! And climb we did, with a purpose. Thankfully, we left most of the freakish ants behind, though every few seconds another one would emerge from the neckline of my t-shirt and take a bite out of whatever it could reach. Ah! You little bastards! The ants paid me no heed. Still we climbed, slowing now as the route became more and more difficult. I thought I could see the top, but it looked like the final push would be the biggest challenge so far. Behind and below me, the two girls battled on, though there was rising panic in their voices when they asked me where to put their feet next. A ledge, I cried. Let's get up there and we can have a breather. Thank God, said Rue. How? Said Jill. I can't see where to go. Just a little further, I told her. I grabbed hold of a twisted tree trunk that seemed to grow right out of the rock and dragged myself up onto the ledge above it. Rue followed, taking my hand, clearly straining to lift herself over the edge. It had been a long climb, and she immediately set about pulling ants from her clothes and squishing them. Jill reached the last section below the ledge and balked at the height of it. I'm not tall enough, she said, her voice shaking with exertion and fear. It's okay, I told her. Just grab onto this tree. You can haul yourself right up on it, and I'll grab your other hand. I don't know, it's very high. I could tell she was about to panic. Don't worry, it's easy, I told her. Rue just did it, and I helped her up. Come on, you'll make it. She didn't sound very confident, but she gave me a shaky, okay. She stretched out for the tree trunk, grabbed a hold of it, and pulled. And the tree trunk came straight out of the cliff face as though it had never been attached in the first place. Jill fell. I know it sounds hopelessly cheesy, but time really does slow down in moments like this. Or at least it does for me. I had thoughts that would have taken me minutes to speak aloud. Chief amongst them was my voice repeating over and over, I just killed her. I just killed my sister. Jill's dead. I've killed her. I saw it all in a flash. Her body smashed and bloody in a pile of rocks at the foot of the cliff, the horror in Mum's face as she looked at me. And according to Rue, I screamed. Jill did not scream. She also did not die. Scrabbling at the rock like a cartoon character, she fell about 10 feet in the blink of an eye. Knees, elbows and fingertips bounced off the cliff, scuffling and scraping, and then her feet found a narrow lip and stuck there. By terrified reflex, she wrapped her whole body around the cliff face, hugging it for all she was worth, and her trip downwards was over. For now, anyway. Jill! I shrieked down at her. She didn't reply for what seemed like an eternity. Then a croaky, I'm okay, floated up. And Jill lay against the rock, breathing heavily and quite possibly crying a little bit. But I could hardly blame her for that. I was crying too. I think we'll call that shock and say no more about it. After a few minutes, Jill regained control over her body. She was weak and trembling, but she was alive. And she was about to face the ordeal of climbing back up again, because there really was no other way down, and it was a long, long way down. Rue and I stared at her, and Jill stared back up at us. I'm going to take a picture, she called. Hey? Okay. I could see what she was up to. Faced with continuing the climb, and well aware of her failing strength and shaking limbs, she'd found an excuse to extend her breather. Her camera was dangling from the back of her belt, and with one hand she reached around and unzipped its case. Lying there, sprawled across the rock like it was the living room carpet at home, only with about 75 degrees of difference, she pointed the camera right up at us and killed a couple of minutes trying to get a clear shot. Rue even took one back of her, which was nice. But it still didn't solve the problem, so eventually, with much cajoling, we coaxed Jill back up the cliff. With no tree to haul on, the last section was a toughie, so I climbed down again to help her, And then, rather than rest and risk losing heart, I mercilessly bullied the others on up the last stage of the climb. It was the hardest part yet, even without considering our mental state, but somehow we pushed on through and made it. I considered it one of the most difficult free climbs I've ever done. Not the hardest or the longest, but certainly the one where I came closest to shitting myself. For the girls who have managed it was nothing short of miraculous. I told them so too as we lay there on the flat top of the gorge. That was amazing, I said. The best climb I've ever seen either of you do. It was something to be proud of, a real achievement. You guys were incredible. To her credit, Jill agreed. Yeah, that was amazing, she said. The elation of pulling off such a feat was flooding through her, overwhelming the despair that she must have been feeling only minutes earlier. Rue's face was flushed with excitement too. I've never done anything like that before. I knew you could do it, I said. Both of you did so well. Next time it'll be loads easier because you've got this experience now. Next time you'll know you can do it. Jill pushed herself to her feet. I don't think there should be a next time just yet. Well, okay, that's a fair point. We've definitely done enough for today. And anyway, it'll be getting dark soon. Rue was standing too now, admiring the view from what felt like the top of the world. I stood up to join them and studied the path we'd been following along the bottom of the gorge. It looked like a dark red pen line drawn all squiggly across the lighter dirt. That is a long way, she said. It is, I agreed. So, I was wondering, how do we get down? And I'll leave it there.
What a moment. Your mum, yeah, she'd never forget that.
That was a cracking one.
When you told her, she, yes, aged a little bit.
I know, interesting actually. I mentioned in there the time that I do inadvisable climbing and the time in Thailand that I actually I came close, and it was it's quite interesting because I actually found a little bit. I wrote about that and then I cut it out of the Don't Need the Holder of the Thailand book because it didn't really add much. But it was it was a sobering experience. I just decided to climb around the headland where we went diving a lot. And we dove from one jetty and from one beach, and they were really close to each other. And I figured that if I started climbing at the jetty, I could probably climb all the way around the headland, back to the beach, and then walk up the road. It would be a nice and easy trip. And but of course, we went everywhere with a truck laden with dive gear or by motor scooter. So I didn't realise quite how far it was. So I went off and I climbed around the headland, and when I got around the headland, instead of seeing it curve back into the beach, it curved back into a bay and out again around another headland, more than twice as far, I thought. And I realised that I only had enough strength left to make the climb as I thought it was, not enough strength left to do double the climb. So there's a few ropey moments there, but because I was literally climbing around the cliffs which form the edge of the island. But anyway, it was fun and I really enjoyed it. But after it, I was a bit shaken up for a while.
And you still climb now.
And I do.
You do
But
like to climb.
I've recently started climbing with ropes, you'll be delighted to know. Only indoors, because that's the only place they have ropes. I'm not going to take ropes with me when I just go randomly walking. Who would do that? That's crazy.
Susan Jackson says it would be great if you did your own audiobooks. Hint, hint.
Yes. Well, the audiobooks, as you can tell from my reading, I fluff every other word, and I can sort of, because I wrote it, I'm reading it in my voice. So I'm injecting the sort of the emotions and the inflections that I would put in it. But to be honest, the guy who actually did the audiobooks is so much better. He is brilliant. Yeah, go on. Hit play. On which one?
It's just any Kamikaze Kangaroo. You just hit play and see what comes
some of them are really random though. But Rue's actually got the audiobook on here, and they sent me the company that agreed to do my audiobooks. They sent me an audition for a guy. Hey, this is the guy we're thinking of doing your audiobooks, and he was sounded like an older American gentleman, and with a really, really kind of slow speaking voice and a real drawl. It was like sort of, and then I looked at the cliff face and I thought to myself, and I was listening, I was like horrified. I was like, oh my God, this couldn't be further from my voice. So I spent about 2 days drafting this incredibly polite email to them, not wanting to, sort of complain or anything like that. But to very delicately explain that this wasn't ideal because, you know, I'm English, and so I sent this email to them, and I got this one said, "Oh, I didn't realise you were English."
Oh, hello.
It's like, they even looked at my books. But anyway, they'd bought the rights, so they were investing thousands of dollars in production. So anyway, the next guy they sent me was actually a guy who lives in California, American guy who does an English accent, but he does a really good English accent. So let me see if I can get one up here.
The curve. All right, you lot. It's time to admit it. 95% of everything you know about Australia comes from watching old episodes of Neighbours. No? Really? Okay then. Home and away. Don't worry, same here. Only it was more embarrassing for me because I was actually in Australia.
Australia.
So, on my first morning in the country, I was
Anyway.
supposed to rearrange.
He's really good.
He's really good, but Rue has one complaint, which is he when he
makes
does
me sound
Rue,
like a Kiwi.
yeah, he does her with the New Zealand accent.
How embarrassing.
Which she's terribly offended by. It's such a shame because he's like of all the accents to do, he can apparently do a Kiwi accent, which is really really hard. Anyway, the audiobooks are absolutely brilliant, really 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 good. I don't make any money off them, so I'm not tooting my own horn to say go and get them, but they're dead funny. I listened to when I got this guy's audition, he was reading the first bit of That Bear in My Pants, and I absolutely peed myself just listening to the first. And he wasn't even telling it jokes; he was just describing it. I thought to myself, "What on earth was I doing in Ecuador?"
That's
Hilarious.
so not you.
Anyway, so they are absolutely gold, and I think if you have Audible, you get like credits and stuff like that. So you pay for the Audible subscription. You don't actually have to pay individually for the
But
books.
just in the USA.
Oh yes, unfortunately they're only US. You can only buy them in the US. If you are in the UK, I may be able to get hold of some if you send me a message. Well, you know, don't tell everybody because that's strict on the QT.
Susan says, "Why don't you make your money off them?"
Oh, I don't make any money off them because they, because I don't sell any of them. They bought me out. They gave me an advance, which was amazing because, like, at the time I was selling a few books, and they obviously came across me and thought there was some money to be made. How foolish they were.
Oh,
So they actually paid me an advance of $500 per book, and at the time I had 5 books out, so they did all 5. So there isn't an audiobook of The Acting, the last book, number 6. So they did those 5. So I made like $2,500 cash up front, boom, which was amazing. And what did we buy with that? It paid for something really significant.
yeah, probably a car.
Yeah, I think we might actually have bought a car with that because I think we were pretty hard up. We were always pretty hard up. But anyway, now I earn, technically that was my advance, so any royalties I earn, they keep until I, what they call earned out, which is where I've earned enough money to be equivalent to the advance that they paid me beforehand. And I think I've sold in total something like about 200 audiobooks worldwide since they did them. So they're still out a significant amount of money. So I can sell like about another 500 or 1,000 copies or something before I'll start making anything, at which point I think I finally get to start making like about $1.30 an ebook. But I just wanted them, well, I wanted the $2,500, let's face it. But also a lot of people were asking me about audiobooks, and I wanted them to exist and to be out there so that people could have them if they wanted. And I was like, I'm never going to sit and do this. Little did I know that I'd be actually doing this all this time later. But in fairness, it is taking me weeks to do this. And if I was doing it with any kind of, if I was going to sell them, the quality would have to be like way better than this. And they're not video, they're only audio, but I don't think this counts. This backing cloth probably is not very high tech compared to, you know, the audio sound recording booths that these pros use with all the bloody conical polystyrene or foam or whatever. I'm using my phone microphone.
Hey, technology. Works.
You know, it's good gear, but let's face it, I'm not professional. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, guys. I'm going to go to bed now, and I will love you and leave you. Really appreciated you all following along and listening to me. Next week we will do another Kamikaze Kangaroos, but we'll take a deep dive and we'll try and find something a bit interesting and a bit different. And that is it. So good night from me, and
good night.
good night from her.
Bye bye.
So see you later, guys. Stay safe and look after yourselves.